Hello and welcome to Calls. This is the 2023 Fall FedEx RSM Initial Research Show. That's right, we have reached the end of the Fall FedEx portion of the schedule. The last tournament on the PGA Tour for FedEx Cup points, that is. The last tournament of the 2023 calendar year. So exciting times, players trying to lock up their status for the 2024 season. Congratulations to Camilo Villegas, a very heartwarming story to win down in Bermuda, which I was nowhere near, did not have any Camilo Villegas. Should have listened to myself, essentially, been much more high on Alex Noren as he played well throughout the week. Once again, another week with a lot of good plays, a couple of poor ones, and a not too optimal lineup construction. And so we are going to try and fix that for the RSM this week and the final tournament of 2023. So let's get into it. All statistics provided tonight and every night are from FantasyNational.com. It is the best golf analytics tool out there for your money. There are a lot of great tools out there, no doubt about that. I simply believe Fantasy National is the best. It's going to make you a much better golf DFS player. It's going to give you a leg up on your golf DFS wager. So get out there and check FantasyNational.com. You won't regret it. In the description to the video, there are links to all of the social media, my X and Instagram, where I post research every week on the PGA Tour. That'll be no different. That comes out tomorrow on Mondays. So if you would like to see the research that I do every week, give me a follow at your preferred social media site. X is also where I post my betting cards and my player exposures every week for the PGA Tour. I post those every Wednesday after the DFS Tactics show. So if you want to see either of those pieces of information that I post weekly, give me a follow over at X. And then speaking of Wednesdays, Gabe's X handle is in the description. He writes a very good article called The Fringe, which comes out every Sunday, and he continues to update you throughout the week on his course breakdown, on his past performances, recent history, and all that. We've been working together a long time with some pretty positive success. So go show Gabe some support. Follow him over on social media and then subscribe to that article, because if you do, you're going to be able to join us in his Substack chat on Wednesday evenings after calls. So again, go show him some support, follow him, and subscribe to that article. And then lastly, we're live. Chat is open. Did you have Camilo Villegas at Bermuda? If you did, that's a big hit. I want to hear from you all. I want to hear about any success that you had this week in your DFS lineups. I had a lineup that was second in a contest. The $3 3-entry contest was second going into the weekend. Players kind of fell off. So what looked like could be a promising weekend turns out to be a little bit of a dud. But I want to hear from you all. How was your weekend, and who do you think has the upper hand leading into your early stages of research this week for the RSM? So let's do our initial research for the final tournament of 2023's calendar year, the Fall FedEx RSM. And we're going to start, as we always do, on a Sunday evening over at the GCSAA Tournament Fact Sheet. And a quick note, and thanks to Gabe again, as he let me know that the RSM has its current format going back to 2015. What I mean by that is the RSM is one of these tournaments that has some alternate courses throughout the week for players to play throughout the tournament. The main course, Seaside at Sea Island Resort, is going to be used 3 of the 4 rounds. The other round for players is the Plantation course. So Thursday and Friday, players will rotate, or alternate, I should say, playing Seaside and Plantation. If a player plays Seaside on Thursday, they will play Plantation on Friday, and vice versa. Now, the entirety of the weekend portion of the tournament, Saturday and Sunday, is all played at Seaside. So, just for your information as the viewer, that is the format of the RSM Classic, and this format has been in existence since 2015. So just letting you know that as well. So thanks to Gabe for informing me on that little piece of nugget of information. But we are in St. Simons Island, Georgia. Let me see if I can't scroll or zoom in a little bit for you here. Might be a little bit too much because I'll have to move myself. There we go. We are in St. Simons Island, Georgia at Sea Island Resort. The main course is the course we're going to be talking about probably 90 to 95% of the time this week. I will show you a little bit about the Plantation course, but in general, I am talking about Seaside, and I will make sure to notate if I'm talking about Plantation. But Seaside, very short course. Actually, both courses are very short, but Seaside, par 70, measuring at 7,005 yards on the official scorecard. I know it says unofficial there, but the GCSAA tournament fact sheet always lists about 7,005 yards as the yardage. So a short course is what we have at St. Simons Island and Sea Island Resort. Nothing to do with course architect. This is a Harry Colt and Charles Allison design, renovated by Tom Fazio in 1999. Now, Tom Fazio does have some redesigns and renovations on the PGA Tour. If you are interested in that, let me know in chat or on social media. I'll be happy to go research which courses he has his hand in terms of redesigns and renovations, but nothing in terms of the original architect, as this is a Harry Colt and Charles Allison design. Again, par 70, short par 70, 7,005 yards. These greens, however, are pretty darn large, 7,200 square feet. On average here at Seaside in St. Simons Island and at Sea Island Resort. 25 acres of fairway is a little bit misleading. That would be, maybe about average, maybe even slightly wider. The reason why there's so few acres of fairway is because this course is generally pretty short. There's a note here. The average fairway widths in landing areas are 47 yards. That is very, very wide. And again, so this 25 acres of fairway is a little bit misleading. It's just the fact that this course is so short, you don't have a lot of acreage in general, but these fairways are pretty wide. But what you will notice is that there's a lot of forced layups. Being a short course, there are places where driver is just not an important play, or not a prudent play. You can't hit driver on some of these holes here. So lots of forced layups. These fairways are very, very easy to hit, especially with this note down here, 47 yards on average landing area fairway width at Seaside. Not a whole lot of bunkers, 47, but what I was going to say, quite a few numbers of holes with water in play. 13 holes with water in play at Seaside. And as I was mentioning, I think a little bit last week, we are on Tiff Eagle Bermuda again, so we are going to be looking at the same courses specifically for putting that we were last week. That is, and I have the note here, let me grab that off to the side here. So Bay Hill, the host of the Arnold Palmer, has pure Tiff Eagle. Kapalua, host of the Century Tournament of Champions. PGA National, host of the Honda. Port Royal, where we just were, we don't get putting data from there, but they have pure Tiff Eagle Bermuda, and of course Sea Island. So those are the courses we're going to be looking at in terms of putting statistics this week. Pure Tiff Eagle Bermuda on the greens. A little bit of Poa Trivialis on the approaches to the greens, but the fairways and rough are rye overseeded Bermuda. And then very, very quickly, just for the Plantation course, again, nothing to do in terms of an architect. It's a Walter Travis the original design, renovated most recently by Davis Love III to a lot of good reviews among his peers. He is the traditional host of this tournament. The Plantation course, renovated in 2019. It is also a very short course, much shorter in a yardage per hole sense, as the Plantation course is a par 72 that measures 7,060 yards. So we're going to be looking at short course metrics again this week. Now, the Bermuda Championship, Port Royal, is the shortest course on the PGA Tour. Sea Island is not, but it is well under the 7,200 threshold, defining it as a short course per Fantasy National. So both courses under that threshold. Now, the Plantation course, those greens are pretty average size, 6,100 square feet. Quite a bit more fairway, acreage of fairway, 32 acres of fairway, and those fairways are very forgiving as well, 43 yards on average, the average landing area fairway width. 10 holes with water in play over on the Plantation course. Quite a few more bunkers as well, 81 here. So there's a quick look at Plantation just for your information. But again, we're going to be focused mostly on Seaside since the players are going to be playing that course 3 of the 4 rounds if they make the cut. And one last bit of note for Plantation, they are Tiff Eagle Bermuda as well. So pure Tiff Eagle Bermuda on the greens this week on both courses. So there's a look at the 2 courses at Sea Island Resort this week for the RSM in terms of GCSA tournament fact sheet. Again, quick notes, both courses short, less than 7,100 yards, closer to 7,000 yards. So short courses, the greens, while Seaside is fairly large at 7,200 square feet, Plantation's about average. So we're looking at, bigger greens than usual on the PGA Tour. Lots of holes with water in play. 13 at the main course, 10 at the other. And we are on Tiff Eagle Bermuda again, both courses on the greens. All right, with that, we're going to move to Fantasy National. And a decent field this week to close out the FedEx fall. You have a few bigger names here. Ludwig Aubert, Brian Harmon, your defending Open champion winner. Adams Vincent is your defending champion. Corey Connors is here this week. Cameron Young. We do have 2 field changes already, or 2 players that have originally committed and then decided to withdraw. Nikolai Højgaard is one such player who originally committed and is not playing. The other being David Lipsky. Those 2 players have withdrawn already from the RSM Classic, and I'll make sure to update this if there are any more field changes tomorrow. All right, so your top performers in the past 36 rounds, just a big picture view as zoomed out as we can get per se. Russell Henley, JT Poston, Ludwig Aubert, Brian Harmon, Eric Cole, Aaron Rai, Stefan Jaeger, Adams Vincent, Denny McCarthy, and Luke List. Those are your top performers the last 36 rounds that are here at Sea Island Resort. First thing we're going to do, again, short courses, both of them. Now, it is important to note that we don't have shot link data for the Plantation course. We do have it for Seaside, so 3 of the 4 rounds will have shot link data, and the Plantation round does not. But on short courses, and I do not believe the Bermuda is in here yet. Let's see, Brendan Todd definitely played. That's for the Wyndham. We'll take a look here just very quickly. Yeah, so the Bermuda Championship is not loaded yet into the Fantasy National database. That will come in tomorrow. So these might change a little bit tomorrow. That's why I like to do quick reviews at the beginning of shows. But anyway, our top performers on short courses this calendar year, Chris Kirk, Russell Henley, Eric Cole, Brian Harmon, Brendan Todd, Corey Connors, Denny McCarthy, JT Poston, Taylor Montgomery, and Ludwig Aubert are your top 10 in terms of performance or total performance on short courses. Before we get any further, let me go ahead and go to the course breakdown here in Fantasy National. Again, we're going to focus mainly on the Seaside course. We will take a quick look at the Plantation course as well, but Seaside has a lot of shorter holes to it, as you would expect for a par 70 that's just at 7,000 yards. And in fact, one of the most distinguishing features of Seaside is that it doesn't have a lot of overly difficult holes. Now, you do run into a few bogeys here and there, especially with the amount of water that's in play. The par 4 14th plays to a 10th of a shot over par. You got the second and third most difficult holes play to essentially what is a 10th of a shot over par, 600ths, 500ths, but there are quite a few holes that play under par. 18th, or the easiest hole, par 5 15th, plays to more than a half a shot under par. The other par 5, the par 5 on the front, plays to a quarter of a shot under par. 1700ths, a 10th, basically a 10th, almost a 10th. So lots of scores that are, slightly better than par. And that's going to be a fairly common theme, especially if the wind is down, like it was for Bermuda and Port Royal the first day. We saw professionals just light that course up because there was a lack of wind. If the wind is not if it's not blowing at Sea Island, the course is very, very gettable. Both of them being very, very gettable. But Seaside especially, because it is the more coastal, it runs along the coast more than the Plantation. The Plantation is more inward, or inland, I should say. And the Plantation course actually plays easier than this. So quite a few scores under par here. Now, you do have a very high eagle rate on this par 5 15th. 4.5% is a very good eagle chance. Now, the other par 5 actually doesn't yield an eagle a whole lot. Fairly long hole, 582 yards. It yields a lot of birdies, more than 33%, but not a lot of eagles. And whatever length there is at Seaside comes into a couple of the par 5s and the par 3s, similar to Port Royal. You have a 204-yard par 3, you have a 223-yard par 3, and a 192-yard par 3. So quite a few long par 3s here at Seaside. In fact, the shortest one is 179. So some fairly long par 3s that make up whatever length there is on this course. We move to the strokes gained by shot type. Again, Seaside, the main course we have ShotLink for the top 10s. This is a putting tournament. This is absolutely a putting tournament. These greens are large. This course generally is pretty easy. Professionals are going to hit these greens very, very often. The fairways are easy to hit. So this quickly becomes a putting contest. Approach, not to be ignored, has its place. And off the tee, going to outweigh the around the green. Again, the fact that these greens are so darn easy to hit. Move the top 5s. This same distribution is consistent. And then for the winners, all in the putting. You see how much the putting really skyrockets in terms of strokes gained. What's interesting, however, is that the around the green for the winners actually surpasses the off the tee. So that's interesting to see as we go through a little bit of the Microsoft Excel data, and especially tomorrow on the data dive when we look at prior leaderboards, we'll figure out what might be causing that, and how much that really plays, how much we want to factor in around the green or off the tee, distance, anything to that effect. But the overwhelming takeaway here for Seaside is putting. It's a putting tournament, and that's why I'm very Grateful again to Gabe to have given me the list of courses last week that have pure TIFF Eagle Bermuda, and that's what we're going to focus on this week. So there's a look at your strokes gained. We move to strokes gained by hole by par. Not surprising that the par 5s are lacking a little bit in terms of strokes gained. There's only 2 par 5s here at Seaside. 12 par 4s and then your 4 par 3s. So fairly even across the different pars. I would argue that the par 5s are a little bit mitigated because generally this is what's holding the most of your strokes gained. A little bit mitigated here with only 2 of them. The par for your top 5s, much more of the same. Par 5s and par 4s roughly equal. Par 3s lagging a little bit behind. For your winners, again, a whole lot of the same. Par 5s, par 4s. To me, it's a little surprising that the par 3s aren't carrying any more weight. But you see here from the top 5s, the top 10s, the winners, par 3s haven't contributed a whole lot. If we come back up to the scorecard very quickly, you've got the 4th easiest hole, which is a par 3. The 3rd hardest, so you've got a 10th under par, essentially a 10th over par, 500ths over, and 400ths under. So that's probably why these par 3s aren't gaining a whole lot. Is that, throughout the history of the RSM and at Seaside, these par 3s have played to right about par. 2 of them playing over par, 2 playing under par. So there hasn't been a whole lot to gain on those holes, at least over the course of Seaside's shot link existence. All right, we move down to hole composition. And Seaside has one clear, obvious range that we're probably going to be focusing on. But for your par 3s, you do have 2 from 175 to 200, 2 from 200 to 225. So again, this magic kind of 200 threshold, you have a 179 and a 192. You can see those being moved, or especially the 192, you can see that perhaps being lengthened. It's going to take a significant shortening for the 179 to fall below the 150 threshold. So more than likely, we're looking at right in that 200 threshold, maybe 3 par 3s playing to 200 to 225 on a given day. As for your par 4s, you do have one, I'm going to call it semi-drivable. Only the biggest of big hitters and the most confident, accurate drivers really push it. Most of the time this is a layup. One very short par 4, 350 to 400. 9 of your 12 par 4s, 75% of the par 4s at Seaside measure 400 to 450 yards. So very quickly you can see more than likely the range and exact type of holes we're going to focus on this week over at Seaside. We do have 2 longer par 4s from 450 to 500. Both par 5s measure from 550 to 600. Approach shot distribution, even though this is a short course, there are quite a few forced layups. So majority of your approach shots are coming, 150 to 175, 125 to 150, this range here. That's just the nature of the RSM. You're taking a lot of 3-woods, a lot of irons off tees, still leaving yourself with, 9 iron. These are professionals, 9 irons, maybe some wedges here, but wedges, 9 irons into these greens as opposed to, lob wedges and such, the 75 to 100 range, since this is a short course, but you do have forced layups. So the most prominent approach shots come from 125 to 175, more so 150 to 175. Historic cut line. This tournament has gotten easier over the years, as you can see from this historic cut line. With the inclusion of the Plantation course in 2015, it played to +1, has not gotten to even par since. It's been -4, -6. It got all the way to -7 in 2022 when Taylor Gooch won. Last year was -4. So you see, just very, very easy. And a lot of that, it has to do with the plantation course. It used to be really, really taken advantage of. Very similar to Torrey Pines. Torrey Pines South, notoriously difficult. Torrey Pines North was always much easier. Has gotten a little bit more difficult over the years. But now, for this week, we're at Sea Island. Plantation course has gotten a little bit tougher, but again, just very, very easy. The cut line for this tournament. Scoring distribution, again, almost double the terms of birdies than bogeys. Almost 20% birdies. You only have 12% bogeys. A few doubles just because there is water on this course. A lot of water. 13 holes with water in play. So a little bit of trouble if you are not on top of your game, but generally speaking, as you can see from the cut line, scoring distribution, as you can probably see from these graphs to the left of me, very easy. They're pretty darn easy depending on the wind. So you're going to have to go and get your birdies here. Driving accuracy, more than 70%. Again, that's the nature of the RSM. You don't have a lot of driver holes. You have a lot of forced layups. These landing areas are wide because of that. So 70% driving accuracy, that would mean that you probably aren't going to be focusing on fairways much this week. Again, we'll check the wind forecast starting tomorrow, unless it is forecast to be very windy. Probably not looking at fairways. Green and regulation percentage also very, very high here. Almost 75% versus 65% at the average tour event. These greens are large. The course is short. You're going to have a lot of greens in regulation this week, which signifies this is putting, and we saw that in the charts up here. This is all about putting here at Sea Island. So an initial thought would be that greens in regulation probably aren't the statistic we want to look at either. 3 putts per round, a little bit higher than the average tour event. That's just due to the size of the course, or size of these greens, excuse me. Driving distance, much less than the average tour event. Again, just beating a dead horse seemingly, but forced layups. You have 3 woods and irons off the tee, so much less in terms of driving distance. Now, what is interesting, even though these greens are large, the proximity to the hole is much closer than the average tour event by almost 2 feet. It's about 1.5, which also indicates that the tournament is generally fairly easy and it becomes a putting contest. So there's a look at Seaside, the main course, and the data that we have for that. I will take you to the plantation very, very quickly. There are a few holes here that I want to highlight, including the final stretch. 2 of the final 3 holes are par 5s, and they're very, very easy. A half a shot under par, 0.6 under par. Look at the eagle rates, 4.2%, 7.2%. Humongous eagle rates. You combine that with Seaside's 1 very gettable par 5. I will check Microsoft Excel later and see if eagles is something we want to look at, but we're definitely looking at birdies are better because eagles do happen. I mean, even one of the par 5s on the front yields almost a 2% eagle rate. There is a little bit of trouble on the back again. Now, the toughest hole in relation to par, surprisingly, is actually on the plantation course. Plays to 0.2 over par. The hardest hole at Seaside was 1/10 or 1100ths, I think. So the actual most difficult hole in relation to par has been the Plantation's par 3 15th. You got a 2/10, a little bit over a 10th, a little bit over a 10th. But again, these very easy par 5s are bringing the scoring average down significantly, extremely significantly. In fact, the par for the Plantation is in between the 8th and 9th most difficult holes. So that would tend to be on the easier side, and you have the two very easy par 5s on the back, really contributing to the ease. Strokes gained by hole by par. We skipped the strokes gained by shot type as there's no shot link here. Strokes gained by hole by par, not surprisingly, 4 par 5s at Plantation, meaning the par 5s are gaining quite a bit here. But don't ignore your y-axis. This is actually fairly close together, fairly evenly distributed like Seaside, 0.08 to a 0.06 and 0.06. Now the 3s and the 4s are essentially identical. For your top 5s, more par 5s, and for your winners, the par 3s really fall off. Par 4s rise and the par 5s significantly rise. These are your guys that are making eagles here. So we're going to be looking at par 5s quite a bit for this week, at least initially. Par 3s look like they have some mitigation here. And then the last thing I'm going to show you for the Plantation's whole Plantation course is the whole composition. 2 par 3s that measure 150 to 175, 1 from 200 to 225, and 1 225 plus. So these are the only 2 that measure to this length on the scorecards at either course. This is the only one that measures to this length at this length on the scorecards. So 3 of the par 3s at Sea Island measure 200 to 225. That's the majority of our par 3s. Again, we'll go into Microsoft Excel a little bit later and really hammer it tomorrow in the data dive. Figure out if there is a range, which one there is, if we want to focus on one. For the Plantation, par 4s, there is a drivable par 4. 0 to 350, it measures at 3 something, 301. But it actually plays a little bit over par. It is a very big risk-reward hole. But it is drivable. You have several short par 4s here, 350 to 4 of them, 4 from 400 to 450, 1 from 450 to 5. Your par 5s, 2 from 500 to 550, 2 from 550 to 6. So 75% of your par 5s across the 2 courses measure 550 to 6. And then you do have 2 short par 5s, 500 to 550. Now scoring for Plantation, a whole lot of birdies, very few bogeys. You can even see the Eagles bar here, so very, very, very gettable. Very gettable. All right, with that, we're going to come back to the player page view this week for the RSM. Not going to look at off the tee or around the green. Let's just take a look at approach just very, very quickly. Make sure I don't have any filters on. Glad I checked. So in the last 36 rounds, our top strokes gained approach players in the field this week: Russell Henley, Mark Hubbard, Sam Ryder, Adam Schenk, Eric Cole, Kevin Roy, Alex Smalley, Aaron Rye, Doug Gim, and Ryan Moore, who had a very, very good Bermuda Championship. All right, last thing in terms of the strokes gained page view, let's take a look at putting. You'll have to bear with me as I focus on the specific courses that have pure TIFF Eagle. Again, it's Bay Hill, the host of the Arnold Palmer Invitational. We have PGA National, the host of the Honda. We have the Plantation course at Kapalua, host of the Century. I will include Port Royal, although we won't get the putting statistics from it. And I was holding the wrong button. I needed to hold Control, not Alt. You stupid. Come here. Alt, Bay Hill. And then, of course, the last one being Sea Island, Seaside, and Plantation. All right. So our top putters on pure TIFF Eagle Bermuda, and I'm going to have to extend this time frame. I'm going to go all the way back to 2019 just to have enough rounds for the players. Your top putters in the field this week on TIFF Eagle Bermuda: Denny McCarthy, Patton Gazire, Chesson Hadley, Ben Taylor, Brian Gay, Brennan Todd, Zach Johnson, Chris Kirk, Dylan Wu, Harris English, and Trevor Werblio. There's your top 11 in terms of putting on TIFF Eagle Bermuda. All right, been going for a little bit. Normally I like to look at one kind of overarching statistic. I'm going to skip that this evening, especially since we haven't looked at the past or historic conditions. So let's do that very quickly. You can see it did get a little bit difficult over at Seaside last year. When you see that the wind picked up a little bit, it got to moderate. But when it laid down, when it was calm, it was easy. Much the same for 2022. The winds picked up, it got difficult. Winds picked up, it got difficult. But even if the wind is moderate, at least for Seaside, generally plays easy, maybe average. The only time it gets really difficult is if the wind picks up. So again, we will check the forecast starting tomorrow and see what the wind forecast is showing for St. Simons Island, Georgia this weekend. All right, with that, again, I'm just scrolling down here to show you that the plantation course was implemented in 2016. It was the 2015 calendar year, but 2016 PGA Tour season. And just showing you that for your information, as I mentioned up at the top of the show. Thanks to Gabe for letting me know that. So whenever I do my research, I'm going to be going back to 2015. Greens, I've always been Bermuda, these TIFF Eagle Bermuda. Hitting fairways, they're only difficult is in the sense that this rough is not difficult to play out of. It did grow to average last year, but generally has been kept short. Generally, the greens are fast. You do get some lightning rounds, however, and that's why I'm not going to be using a speed filter. I'm just going to be looking at pure TIFF Eagle Bermuda. And of course, these courses have always been short, less than 7,200 yards. All right, we're going to move to the tournament history tab, the strokes gained total tab, performance at the RSM or at Seaside/Plantation the past 5 years. Excuse me as I move that out of the way. Your top strokes gained total leader the past 5 years here at the RSM has been Webb Simpson. 3 top 10s, including 2 podium finishes. Now, he did miss the cut last year, but he's, working his way back from injury. He's also getting much closer to the Champions Tour. So take that for what you will, but not a long hitter. Zach Johnson, a lot of success here, not a long hitter. Corey Connors, quite a bit of success here in only 3 tournaments, not a long hitter. Brian Harmon, never a long hitter. Kevin Kisner is a former champion here, had success, not a long hitter. Denny McCarthy's not a long hitter. You do not need length to win here. In fact, I don't really see many long players. I mean, Keith Mitchell has some length off the tee, but most of these players, with the exception of maybe Will Gordon, do not bring a lot of distance to the tee. I say that, and then right under Will Gordon is Luke List. But really, in your top 12 or so in terms of strokes gained total performance the last 5 years here at the RSM, it's these players that are very good, granted, with their irons, like Webb Simpson. Zach Johnson's well known for his wedges and his putting. Corey Connors with his irons, not so much the putter. Kisner, much the same with the putting. Denny McCarthy putting. Brendan Todd putting. Patton Desire putting on this surface specifically. So you can see the kind of players who have had routine amounts of success here at the RSM. The other end of the spectrum, players who have not played well here. Kevin Chappell, 1 for 3. Sun Kang, 1 for 4. Dylan Fratelli, 1 for 4. Sam Ryder, 0 for 5. You'd think that this might suit him. He isn't the longest off the tee, but he's not performed well here. Davis Thompson, someone else who has not performed well here, 1 for 4. Let's see. Kevin Streelman, 2 for 5. Stefan Jaeger, 1 for 3. Austin Cook, a top 15, but some pretty poor performances otherwise. 2 for 5. Stuart Sink, very good Bermuda Championship. 1 for 5 here. Davis Riley, 2 for 3, but some pretty middling to clunker, poor finishes. So there's a look at some players that, for whatever reason, have not played well here at the RSM. All right, that's a good segue. We're going to move to Microsoft Excel. We're going to take a look first at some comparison course data. Let's take a look at how the RSM stacks up against other full field consistent courses on the PGA Tour. Now, surprisingly, you see these numbers, all of them are negative, but look how negative the three of these 4 are. I mean, they are being mitigated a whole lot. Granted, this is only 3 rounds out of a possible 4. We don't have ShotLink over at Plantation Course, but this just emphasizes even more the amount of putting here. Now, the putting is getting mitigated across other full field courses, but not to the extent of the others. So lots and lots of putting. We move to driving and greens and distance, minus 62%. That might be the lowest. I see 2 others that are later in the calendar year for 2024 that are less than 62% under, but just a heavy decrease in value that distance has. It's probably, well, Mayakoba at El Camaleon distance isn't mandatory, another short course, but we weren't there this year. But the RSM, 62% in terms of distance. Fairways, as I thought, it's getting mitigated a little bit. These fairways are pretty darn easy to hit. Greens getting mitigated as well. So I'm not sure if we're going to be looking at anything in terms of distance or greens, sand saves, scrambling. I don't see anything, at least beginning of my research this week, that would signify that I need to look at this, which means there needs to be something in scoring. Of course, we're going to be looking at a lot of putting. We saw that data-wise as well in the course breakdowns. So it needs to be something in scoring or proximity, and there is. So surprisingly, Eagles is actually 40% under, but the birdies 12% over full field course average on the PGA Tour. We'll be looking at birdies are better gained, but early on in our research, we're going to be looking at birdies gained. You got to go low here to contend, as you saw from the ease and the cut line from the Fantasy National Course breakdown. Just got to go low here to contend. So lots of birdies. Few eagles over on the Plantation Course, but a whole lot of birdies. Moving into par 3s, 4s, and 5s. 3s are slightly more important than the average full field course, but we saw how much they were, or how less they were in terms of in relation to par 4s and 5s here. And I want you to focus on the 3 par 3s that measure 200 to 225. 2 of them are over on Seaside. Remember, that's the course that's getting played 3 times out of the 4 this week. Looks like quite a bit of emphasis in the 200 to 225. Par 4s, a little bit higher than the full field course average, but your 2 main ranges. Again, 9 of the 12 par 4s at Seaside measure to this range. 4 each at Plantation measure to these ranges. So we're looking at another course with a lot of short par 4s. Our focus is going to probably be on these 2, like it was for the Bermuda Championship. And then par 5s showing slightly under full field course average because of the lack of importance generally over at Seaside, since there's only 2 of them. But the one range that is above full field course averages is the 550 to 600. Both at Seaside measure to this range, and 2 of the 4 at Plantation measure to this range. Finally, we'll take a look at proximity. And again, proximity generally is my weakest golf analytic metric. It's just not consistent. It doesn't make a lot of sense from a statistician's point of view. But the majority of approach shots come from this range over on Seaside, and it's good to see that they are carrying a fairly significant importance against other full field courses. So a good starting point for proximity, if you are big into proximity, would be to look at these 2 ranges. Probably more so the 150 to 175, but I think you want to look at both. So there's a look at Sea Island Resort, specifically Seaside, since that's the only course of the 2 we have ShotLink data. But a look at Seaside against other full field consistent courses on the PGA Tour. We're going to end the show off, as we always do on a Sunday evening, with the early look file. A reminder that this is the player, the number of events, or the number of times they've played the RSM the past 5 years, 5 being the most, their average finish, the times they've missed the cut, and their average in the whatever metric, specifically at Sea Island. I'm going to remove the players. Gosh dang it, I wanted filter. I'm going to remove the players that have only played it once or twice. I want to see the players who have played this tournament consistently, 3, 4, or all 5 of the past 5 years, what they've done well. And a couple of things really stand out to me. Now, Corey Connors has played pretty darn well here. 3 for 3, average finish of 18th. Webb Simpson's played well here. 4 for 5, average finish inside the top 30. But you quickly get into these high 30 and 40s average place finishes. That means that this tournament tends to be volatile a little bit. You will have your horses for courses. You know, Corey Connors, Webb Simpson, Zach Johnson, they generally play well here. And you could probably even throw Brian Harmon in that. Keith Mitchell deserves to be in there as well. These horses for courses that generally you target these guys on these courses. But this seems pretty volatile in terms of consistent success for a lot of these players. If a course is set up for sustained success for players, you would probably see more in the 20s and low 30s in terms of these average finishes. But what are these players doing well? Well, we're going to have to go down here a decent amount. This is 12 players. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, let's go to anyone who's averaged a top 50. And I know that doesn't sound great, but it's just the fact that we need to get enough players into this sample size. So the players who have played generally the best at Sea Island Resort, the RSM Classic, your off the tee is a 0.5, not really carrying a whole lot of weight. You see a lot of heavy green here in terms of approach. This is a 0.7. It's just kind of getting hurt by Patton Gazire and Brendan Todd, but Russell Knox, Will Gordon has hit his approaches here very well. Webb Simpson, Corey Connors, that's their game, but they've still been pretty good. Around the green, not carrying a whole lot at all, 0.2. And then putting, more positive than negatives. This is a 0.8. So it is the highest. Now, Will Gordon hasn't putt well here. Doug Gim, not surprisingly, has not putt well here at all. Russell Knox hasn't putt well here at all. But you do have a few really standout performances. Again, Patton Gazire, one of the best, if not the best, on specifically Tiff Eagle Bermuda. Denny McCarthy, I would argue, probably the best putter in the world. Certainly one of the handful best putters in the world. So no surprise to see him up here in terms of top performance at Sea Island. Brendan Todd, a winner at the Bermuda. Kevin Kisner's a former champion here, has got some good putting. And then the defending champion, last year's champion, Adam Svensson, has putt very well here. But I want to highlight how much the volatility of this course. Adam Svensson missed the cut, wins. So a lot of volatility at Sea Island. Looking into distance and fairways and greens, you got some red up here. Like I said, Will Gordon's got some length, so not surprising to see him kind of leading the way in terms of distance, but it is not mandatory. I mean, Webb Simpson is never long, and he's actually positive in terms of driving distance here at the RSM. It is just not needed. Brendan Todd, a lot of success. McCarthy's not long. Doug Gim's not long. Brian Harmon's certainly not long. Zach Johnson's certainly not long. You don't need distance to succeed here. Fairways, these are all so very easy to hit. You're not going to gain a whole lot with the fairways gained, except if the wind is really atrocious and really going a lot. Greens, okay, maybe a little bit here. But again, I don't think I want to put a whole lot of stock into that. These greens are easy to hit. They're large. The pros are generally going to have wedges in here, so they should be hitting these greens. So not a lot to gain there. Again, at least in our initial research, I don't see much in this entire page view that I'm going to be focusing on. I'll move to scoring. You've got a few eagles, sure. But nothing, not stand out by any means. It's in the birdies. It is in the birdies. Only 2 players who have averaged the top 50 and played it consistently are negative in terms of birdies gained, and one is really darn close to field average in birdies gained. It's really Denny McCarthy who is lacking in the birdies gained. And you kind of expect that with him being such a good short game player, good around the green, good putting. He mainly avoids bogeys. But lots in the birdies gained here. This is a 1.5 bogey avoidance, 1.2. So again, slight edge to the birdies gained, and we saw that statistically against other courses in Microsoft Excel with the comparison course. Moving to the par threes, played fairly well by the players who have performed well here. This is a 1.0. Par fours are always going to win. It's a 2.1. That's actually fairly mitigated. It's only doubled the par threes. Sometimes you'll get 4 and 5 times the importance on par fours. So these par fours are a little bit mitigated if it's only doubling the par threes. And the par fives are at a 0.9. So pretty even, as we saw in the graphs in the course breakdown. It's pretty even here. Pretty even. Most important range actually has not been played all that well by the players who have played this course the best. Surprising to see. So there you go. Maybe we look at par threes just in general. We'll get a clearer picture tomorrow in the Data Dive show. Par fours, you see, they are still going to be important. You're still going to have to play them well. The 2 most important ranges seemingly are these 2, the 350 to 4. You got 1, 2 players negative. This is a 0.9. This is going to be a lot lower. Well, it's a 0.8. It's getting really hurt by Alex Noren and Doug Gim. But even with the 3.2, with the 1.8, with the fact that 400 to 450 is keeping up with the 350 to 4, tells you that that's probably the most important range, which makes a lot of sense. 9 of the 12 par 4s at Seaside are in this range. 4 of the 10 at Plantation are in this range. So it makes a lot of sense. And then finally, for your par 5s, it's interesting to note, not a single player is negative in par 5 performance who has averaged a top 50 and played the RSM consistently. So if you want to take a little bit of a longer look at some players early on in your research this week, especially if you get into some wagers in the betting board tomorrow, look for par 5 performers. They have generally played the par 5s fairly well. Again, not a single player negative in terms of par 5 performance, specifically at the RSM. Most important range is clearly the 550 to 6. Only one player negative from that range. 0.6 average here, and it was a 0.9 here. So 2/3 are coming in the 550 to 6. Lastly, we'll look at proximity. Not sure if we want to look at total procs since the greens are are pretty large. Now you do have some good numbers here in terms of total procs with Corey Connors and Webb Simpson, Zach Johnson, Russell Knox. But look where it's coming. It's in this 150 to 175. If I go down to Denny McCarthy, not a single player is negative in that range. Now, if I include the others that are in the top 50, you get a couple that are negative, but that's a lot of success for a specific range of proximity in the 150 to 175. Whereas if you look at the 125 to 150, you got some good performances. Connors, Webb Simpson, Brian Harman. But you got some really bad performances in here too that hasn't hindered players from being successful. Will Gordon, Pat Kazire, Doug Gim has been atrocious from this range, specifically at the RSM. So it's looking like 150 to 175 if you want to focus on a proximity range early on this week. And of course, we'll dig into this more tomorrow on the Data Dive. That's going to do it for the show this evening. Thanks to everybody who tunes in, watches, listens, supports the channel by liking the videos, commenting, and subscribing. I always appreciate it. I want to hear from you all, whether it's in the comments of the show or reach out to me on social media. How did you do this week for the Bermuda Championship? Are you going to be playing the final DFS slate, essentially, for the 2023 calendar year? So I want to hear from you all in that regard. But thanks for supporting the channel. Love what I do, taking a look at in-depth statistics and trying to help us all win a little bit of money in the process. For all of the wagers you made this past week for the Bermuda Championship, for all the DFS contests you entered this past week for the Bermuda Championship, and until I see you tomorrow night for the Data Dive show, may all your bets be profitable.